We are here with the Piston Foundation. Thanks to our organizers at Canosa and the Cavallino Classic for having us. And our discussion today is titled, The New Wave, Everything You Don't Know About the Next Generation of Collector Car Technicians. Now, the Piston Foundation is a recently founded in 2021 group dedicated to helping young people acquire the education and the hands-on training to build a career in the collector car industry. I'm Sperry Hitchinson. I am the manager of development for the Piston Foundation, and I am a lifelong automotive acolyte, I was called the other day, and I like that word. And not to brag, but over the last 4 decades, I have owned many Ferrari posters and some very nice die-cast models. Our conversation today centers around a topic that we all know either personally or anecdotally, and that is that there is an uncertainty to the future of the collector car culture, most often attributed to the perception that younger people are not interested in the automobile as we know it today, and the reality that skilled automotive shops and tradespeople are becoming increasingly scarce. But fear not. So with the help of the panel that is here joining me today, we are going to dispel some of the commonly held fallacies and hopefully arrive at a way that all of us can help to change that. So, okay, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our panelists today. And I'm going to begin with, to my right, representing the next generation of skilled technicians. All 3 of our younger panelists are enrolled in the acclaimed automotive restoration program at McPherson College in McPherson, Kansas. And all are recipients of last year's first round of Piston Foundation scholarships. First, an air-cooled enthusiast, guitar strummer, and recent invitee to the Madison Avenue Chowder Society, part of the McPherson class of 24, Miss Zoe Carmichael. Yeah. Another McPherson class of 24 scholar. He is drawn to the sweeping designs and high performance of 1960s automobiles and 1960s eyewear as well. He is Mr. Sean Whetstone on the end. Our final class of 24 representative is a young man who found himself returning to school to study automotive restoration after finding his former career in the world of finance simply neither exciting nor challenging enough. So he is Mr. Jacob Koehn. Rounding out our panel to my left are our experts who embody a diverse range of wisdom. I'll start with first in the middle, the hands-on lead and owner of a renowned service and restoration shop he launched in 1978 when Ferraris were rocking 8-tracks as well as racetracks, and many of today's classics were wearing their original wiper blades. He's no stranger to the challenges of education and training as he serves on the board of McPherson College. His business is Paul Russell and Company, and fittingly, he is named Mr. Paul Russell. Our next expert panelist is a familiar face and name to many here today as he makes his home and a tremendous mark on the world of classic cars here in Palm Beach County. His work has rightly earned awards for decades on many of the lawns of the world's most prestigious concours, as well as being subject to innumerous lusty eyes on Jay Leno's garage, as well as in the collection of California's famed Peterson Automotive Museum. His shop is Rare Classics Restorations, and he is Mr. Jon Dega. Our final piece of the puzzle is a man who is an accomplished vintage racer, competing annually in the Carrera Panamericana. He is a filmmaker, an entrepreneur, a reformed cyclist. We finally convinced him that cars really are a whole lot more fun. And he's my colleague, the president and COO of the Piston Foundation, Mr. Jeff Mason. Okay, so Jeff, I'd like to begin by asking you to help us frame this conversation. From your perspective, what is the primary issue keeping young people from being engaged and hopefully keeping our collector car world turning?
Thanks, Sperry. Man, that was a great introduction for everybody. I think we ought to all write that down as our LinkedIn profiles. That was wonderful. So quite simply, there is no path for a career into the collector car industry for a technician. That is the fundamental issue. Yes, there is education. Yes, you can, if you're lucky enough, find your way into a shop. But for a young person in their teens who has an interest in cars, when they look forward and say, could I make this a career? There is no path that's evident for them to do that. And so we end up losing those interested teens to other industries. So for the Piston Foundation, building a career path into the industry is our focus. And it starts with awareness, scholarships to help with education, and then apprenticeship to help with hands-on training. Those are the three things that we're working to put in place, and those are the things that will create a career path that any young person with the interest can follow.
Awesome. That makes me think about what I said about Jake. You had a career, and then you changed course pretty drastically. What was that experience? What led to that decision?
Part of what it was is the first time I was in college, you have to determine a major at a certain point. You can only take so many general education classes. I panicked and I picked something that I knew I was good at, which was math. So I went with finance. Everything made sense. And then there reached a point where I was just invested in it. I got a job. I worked my way up. And then I just kept getting further and further into the career to where it was either I'm going to do this for 20, 30 more years, or I need to pivot now, because I was never really engaged in it. I like working with my hands. I like seeing a tangible result, and working at a desk just didn't quite do that for me. And so it just led to a point where my wife and I had a conversation about our trajectory, and it took a lot of sacrifice and changing our lives to go back to school to make that decision. And it's something that weighs on us financially, just with the career path and everything, and making sure that we can get myself set up in a good position going forward. And there's a lot of uncertainty as how to get there. I can do great in school. I can find a shop that loves me, but I just want to make sure that I'm evaluating my options and taking the right path. So that's kind of how it's been, and some of the challenges. There's no safety net going to school in your 30s. Parents don't help you out. And so that's a reality of it for me.
Yeah, no, that's a valid experience. What about you, Zoe? What got you into pursuing a career in automobiles?
Well, for me, I'm not really from a car family. Mm-hmm. And I was always interested in cars, but I didn't know too much about them. So I bought my dream car when I was about 20, 21, which is a 1971 Volkswagen Beetle. Yeah. And I love it, but being an old car, about 50 years old, it broke down all the time. Sure. And I just started having to learn to repair it, and I just fell in love with it.
Single car passion got you, and having to fix your own car will do that.
Yes, it did.
Yeah. Now I'm just curious, what about you, Sean? What got you started on this path?
It has always felt kind of inevitable to me, being a 4-year-old playing with Legos and like calling out cars. Oh, there's a red car, there's a blue car, and from there, just being always enamored with it, it was not an option. I didn't want to go to college, but socially I had to, and it was like, no, I want to play with old cars, and my family said, okay, go to college and play with old cars. So here I am.
Yeah, you found the perfect college. Paul, I'm curious. This is something that I was lucky enough to talk a little bit with John the other day about, but what's been your experience with hiring and retaining skilled talent these days? What's it like in your shop?
We feel like we can teach skills, but you need people with a passion. The work is challenging. And I say all the time, if you're just looking for a job, just looking for a place to get in out of the rain and punch a time clock, it's too hard. You have to have the heart for it. And that's, the beginning. Of course, you need good hands and you need a open mind and a love of learning. But it starts with passion. And so one part of the attractive thing for me about even beginning the conversation with a candidate is somebody that actually has chosen the path to go to a program to learn skills and learn about the cars, and that's the thing that we look at. Sometimes we're talking about the normal categories of what their credentials are, but then we also segue into, so what's out in the backyard? I mean, what are you working on when you don't have to go to school, or you don't have to, work wherever you're working to put a roof over your head? And it doesn't have to even be a car. Sometimes it's a motorcycle. Sometimes the guy's a vintage bicycle guy. But there has to be a passion there. That's a essential ingredient.
I don't want to take it for granted that we talked about this the other day, John, but tell me, what's been your experience at your shop with hiring and retaining skills?
Retention is something I've been very fortunate to. Most of my staff has been with me in excess of 10 years and worked with me at 2 different facilities. So I left, they followed me. I've had a number of young people come through, and some stuck and most didn't for whatever reason. But we are fortunate that we're able to offer a good wage, offer benefits, health insurance, disability, so life insurance program, dental, which most automotive shops don't. So I think that goes a long way with retaining. And I also think it's the environment. I mean, obviously, if I was an ogre, people wouldn't want to work for me.
Oh, you don't mean Palm Beach. You mean you yourself?
Yes.
Okay.
So, like I said, I've been very fortunate, but we're unable to grow. We're all aging out. I think the median age in the shop is about early 50s. I just hired back a gentleman that worked for me 10 years ago who's now 61 years old, because the 30-year-old young man that I hired, that I brought from across the country, decided that, the commute's a little far, and I'd rather just do this.
Yeah, I mean, 61-year-old new guy says something about kind of where we're at with this.
Correct.
Yeah. Jeff, I'm curious. There's this notion that I watch a lot of project shows, and there's this discussion even amongst the people that do really well in this world, that are doing the good work. Mike Rowe comes to mind, about choosing this path where it's either you're choosing a trade or you're choosing to go to college. And a dedicated program like McPherson aside, how do you see that conversation, that choice that parents and kids are facing today?
Yeah, the conversation gets framed that way often, and it's the easiest thing to do, but I think it's absolutely the wrong way to frame it, because it's not actually matched up with the reality. So we talk about it as a college yes or no. And in reality, it's a college if and when. So more and more, we're talking with young people who are considering a skilled trade career, and they're weighing that against college, and they're thinking, which do I do first? It's not which don't I do, but which I do first. And we're seeing a lot of young people who have gone into the industry, and this is particularly true in motorsports and vintage motorsports. Of course, my passion is that they'll get a few years under their belt in a shop, and they'll realize that where they want to get to. And for motorsports, it's engineering is required, right? If you want to keep growing your career in motorsports, you've really got to get some engineering. So we're seeing a lot of young people say, okay, I'm ready to go and pursue an engineering degree now. And I know that because they're asking us. They're saying, can the Piston Foundation help me with that kind of scholarship? We're also seeing young people who have maybe 3-4 years of experience through their families or just through their own pursuits. Like Sean, right? So started working on cars because cars were interesting, just like Zoe did. And they'll say, well, I've got some auto experience, but I'm not going to try and duplicate that by going to a community auto tech program. I need to get a college degree so that I can get the engineering I need to then make that step. So the idea that it's it's a yes or no to college or a yes or no to trades is just not the reality of it. It's if and when. So I think we can take all of that off the table and start thinking again that this is a career path that young people are on. As part of the car community, our job is to paint that path as clearly as we possibly can and make it something that they can follow, right? That has all the offshoots that they want to get them where they want to land. One of the great things that I think this industry has is its entrepreneurial spirit, right? I mean, was there ever a shop owner that didn't work on cars? Very few. So, the workshop floor is a path onward to lots of different things. And I think that entrepreneurial spirit is another thing we shouldn't discount, right? And it's not an either or, but an if and a when.
That's fantastic. I want to get back to that. But first I want to ask, Zoe, what do you think, again, going back to this idea of perception and reality, what do you think are some of the strengths of young people working in this collector car world today? I mean, there's, again, this idea that young people aren't interested. Well, we're scrapping that. What are some of the strengths that you see in your abilities to do this?
I would say that young people are definitely interested in cars. They have video games, of course, to credit for that. They have Forza, Grand Theft Auto, and Facebook Marketplace, where we just scroll and scroll looking at cars that we'd love to buy. We're just interested in everything, truly.
Do you see an advantage with some of that technology, some of the familiarity? Jeff and I have talked about ease of access, that he and I were scouring crates of old magazines at yard sales trying to figure out what a Seata was. You're a Google punch away from such things.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point about this generation. They have access to more automotive information than any of us ever had. For you and I, Sperry, it was magazines, right? It was Car and Driver, Road and Track, Hot Rod. That's where we learned. And that was our access point. Now, the internet has made all of that information and more than we ever imagined available. And it's a real strength for younger technicians to have that at their fingertips, but they've grown up with it and they know how to use it. And I think we sometimes discount the digital skills that digital natives, Gen Y, the next group, Gen A, bring to the shop floor.
With that idea of technology, Paul and or John, are you guys kind of keeping current with, the opportunities for digital scanning, rapid prototyping, any of that sort of work? Or are you maintaining sort of the old world craftsman course?
We're trying to understand that opportunities that new technology present itself at the same time, starting with the fundamentals, that understanding. So you can make much better use of 3D printing and things like that if you already understand what characteristics you're looking at in an aluminum casting for an oil pump or something like that. So you can't really have one dimensional track. You need to go down both roads. And, our experience with the 3D printing is it's not magic. You still have to, the end result is something that has the performance characteristics that you're looking for.
What about you, John? You employing those techniques?
Primarily, we're pretty old school. A lot of times we only need one part. So it's much easier for us to chuck it up in a lathe or a mill, carve that piece out, get it on the car, much like we talk about how would Luigi do it. He had his tree stump and his hammer, or they were, casting stuff out of melted down warplane parts. And we do a lot of that. I mean, we built our own furnace to melt plexiglass to form curved windows. We built ovens to harden parts that we machine. We've played around with spray plasma to build up worn parts so that they can be remachined. We've done some 3D printing. We've done some rapid prototyping and scanning. But when you hold that piece in your hand, it doesn't have the flavor. You know, you can't 3D print something and put it on a 1953 Ferrari.
The soul. Yeah.
So I think there's a place for it. If I needed 10 of something, sure. But if I need one, or it's got to pass muster from a Concord judge,
Right.
then I can't just wave a magic wand and push a button.
Sean, does that reflect the education that you guys are getting? You're getting kind of the mix of old world craftsmanship and then some of those cutting edge technological opportunities as well?
Yeah, I think that these cars were built with old world technology, and that the easiest way to rebuild them is with the same technology. We invent new things to make things in different ways, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's a better way.
Jake, you're nodding your head. Yeah, you see it the same? You've experienced the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm more of an old school one. I understand completely what he's saying about sometimes if you just need a part, like it's just a bespoke replacement part, you know, you're not going to invest all this money in this new technology to do it unless you need to do like production runs or so. I just agree with what he's saying.
Yeah. It's called bad money after good, right?
Right.
Paul and John, what do you guys perceive? Paul, I'll ask you first. What do you think some of the hurdles that young people entering this world are today?
Part of it is, you know, one way to develop that passion is through exposure. You know, there's a lot of great collections around the world and in the United States. A lot of them are behind closed doors. You know, you can come to a concourse and see a car on the field. It's in there for a very, very high level technical judging, but that's a kind of rarefied atmosphere. You know, I think one of the greatest developments has been the proliferation of cars and coffee, where they just come and park cars and people can come, and if I'm there and a 4-year-old wants to sit in the Testarossa, I said, jump in, please.
Right.
You know, because that's what I want. I think if you talk to almost every car person, man or woman, that loves cars today, there is a ignition point somewhere where an uncle, their father, a neighbor had this really cool car, and that got them rolling, you know. And so exposure to that, I think, frankly, is a responsibility of today's collectors and owners.
Yeah. Zoe, let me ask you, what do you think are some of the hurdles that you face getting into this?
Finding a good mentor, I think, would be the most important. And that didn't happen for me until a couple years in. I had a good friend who also owns a Volkswagen, and he really taught me everything that I know. And he gave me a manual that I still use to this day called Keep Your Volkswagen Alive. And I'm truly grateful for his mentorship, because I wouldn't be where I am today.
Yeah, mentors are critical. And I think Paul's point of, you know, you see that kid that's beaming at your car, give them the opportunity to get inside, you know. They're typically not going to hurt it. I have a 2.5-year-old son. He hasn't broken too many things of mine. Jake, what do you think are some of the hurdles? I mean, you talked about the financial component. What else?
Well, like how just a second ago, we were talking about how I see with these guys being a little bit younger than me, with like just the technology being around. I didn't have internet until I was 12 or 13 years old. So I see a generation gap just between my own peers. But I think really you can learn a lot from YouTube, and sometimes that's all you have to learn, but it doesn't mean it's the right way to do anything. And so sometimes you just need someone with that actual expertise and experience to tell you just more of the nuances, to whether it's like you can see a video on like how to shape metal or something like that, you know, and doing that and trying to get into the craftsmanship aspect of it on your own, it's just really hard. And it hit a point to where I just couldn't get any further, and I was like, I have to have an education to be where I want to be. I can't do this on my, everything's on the internet, even bad information, right? And so the fact that our school is very niche and unique, and genuinely to me seemed like the only path for what I wanted to do. So I just think that mentorship and having somebody with that experience just goes a really long way. And without it, it's just kind of a scary navigation through that career.
Yeah, no, we all need help. I mean, that's a big thing that I think resonates with me personally, and probably with everybody who's sitting here today. Jeff, as you hear all of these things and mostly the challenges, right, that we're talking about, what are the things that you would say? What does the Piston Foundation do right to help? How are we supporting these efforts and these challenges?
Yeah, it really comes back to the three things. There's awareness, which is really kind of converting that interest into that awareness of a career path. And, Paul mentioned Cars and Coffee, and that is great. And one of the things that we do, we have a program called Car Show Classroom, where we bring young tech students, like high school students who are going to school in tech programs, could be auto, could be STEM. We pair them up with working technicians, and they walk the car show together. In fact, we're doing a version of it tomorrow at the Sport and Classic. And that gets to that, I love that ignition spark. Like, where's that ignition going to come from? And so we're using that program to try to provide that, because most kids don't know someone in the trades. Most of their parents don't know someone in the trade. So if a kid has an interest in being somebody that works with cars, they need a role model to look at. And so that classroom, Car Show Classroom, is about connecting kids with techs who could be a mentor, like Zoe described, but it actually gives them a role model and say, whoa, there's a guy who's 25 working on Porsches all the time, and that 17-year-old says, that's who I want to be. And it's just a simple connection that hopefully provides that ignition and makes the vision of the career possible. So I think we're doing well in understanding what's needed to just reduce the friction for young people and then give them the assistance they need, and that's the other side of it, which are scholarships and apprenticeships.
I like the idea of that evolutionary sort of support. It's not just scholarships, which we're all familiar with, and we can appreciate the work that does, but the continuing efforts, I think that's key. I'm looking at my timer. I'm saying, unfortunately, that we have a schedule to which we are keeping, and I just want to thank Cavallino for supporting us and hosting our students who made it out from McPherson, Kansas. And I hope that you've all learned a few things about the realities and the challenges that are facing not only the young people entering this world, but also the restoration shop owners and experts today. And I further hope that you'll find your way over to our table, the Piston Foundation. We are right at the end of the vendor row here, and that you'll support us in keeping this community, this event, things like this going for generations to come. That's what we're all about. And I appreciate the work that Jeff and all of our crew does to work with both sides of our panel here today. And I want to thank John and Paul and Jeff. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. And a huge thanks again to Zoe and Jake and Sean. And how about a round of applause, because you guys made a big trip and you are the future of this thing. So thank you. All right. Thank you all for joining us.
As we close it out, I just want to boil it down to something very simple that everybody can do. And the simple math of what the Piston Foundation is doing is this: $5,000 supports a scholarship. $15,000 supports an apprenticeship. So if we as a car community want to see this happen, if we want to see these skills sustained, if we want to create career paths for young people with the interest, and we want to help them get there, the very, very simple math is that everybody can sponsor a scholar. Everybody can sponsor a Piston Scholar. From a small gift to a large, everybody can get involved. And really, as a public charity, we're not a private foundation, we are a public charity. It's the car community that supports us, and it's the car community that we look to support these endeavors. And so if you have the capacity to sponsor a Piston Scholar, very simple math. It's $5,000 per kid per year. That's what it takes. And if you're interested in really providing a career path that gets to hands-on training. $15,000 supports an apprenticeship. And every level below that goes directly to our scholarship and apprenticeship programs. It's a 100% goes into those funds to change the lives and create careers for young people. So very simple, just sponsor a Piston Scholar.
Thank you, Jeff. It's true. It's meaningful support. So let's do it. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you.